Have you ever experienced a moment so unexpected, so deeply human, that it changes the course of your entire life? Well, this is one of those stories, and it's real. This is the story of a wealthy man who had everything: success, power, luxury, but stumbled upon something that shook him to his core, something that made him question everything he thought he knew about life and himself. You're watching Stories of Hope, and today's story is one you won't forget. Before we begin, let me ask, where are you watching from? I'd love to know. It was a crisp November morning in upstate New York, the kind of morning where your breath floats in the air and the frost bites at the edges of car windows. Charles Bennett, a 58-year-old self-made millionaire, had just wrapped up a long business trip. He was known for his sharp mind and even sharper suits, always in control, always on time. That morning, he stepped out of the hotel lobby, coffee in hand, ready to drive back to his estate in Greenwich. Charles's black Mercedes-Benz sat parked at the curb, gleaming despite the early frost. His driver had taken the day off, so he was on his own, which he didn't mind. He liked driving, gave him time to think. But when he opened the back door to throw his briefcase inside, he froze. His heart stopped. Curled up under his cashmere coat was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7. She was filthy. Her matted hair clung to her cheeks. Her tiny body trembled in the cold, and her bare feet were cracked and red. Her arms were wrapped around her chest, as if holding herself together, and she was fast asleep. Charles didn't move at first. He just stood there, holding the door open, staring at this child in disbelief. The sound of a distant car horn snapped him out of it. He stepped back, looked around to see if anyone was watching, if maybe this was some mistake, or some cruel prank. But the street was nearly empty, just the wind and the distant hum of traffic. He gently called out, "Hey, sweetheart." The girl flinched and stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Startled, she scrambled backward in fear, bumping into the door on the other side. "Please don't hurt me," she cried, her voice shaking. Charles raised both hands slowly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. You're safe." The girl didn't speak. She just stared at him, eyes wide, breathing fast, her small chest rising and falling, like she was ready to run if she had to. "What's your name?" Charles asked softly. She hesitated, then whispered, "Lily." Charles knelt beside the car door, lowering his voice. "Lily, what are you doing in my car?" "I was cold," she mumbled. "I saw the door open. I'm sorry." His throat tightened. She must have slipped in sometime last night. Maybe when the valet stepped away. She'd been hiding there for hours. "Where are your parents?" he asked. She looked down and shook her head. "I don't have any." Now Charles Bennett wasn't an emotional man. He'd been through too much in life to let things shake him easily. But something about this girl, this tiny, trembling child, hit him hard. He didn't know what came over him, but he took off his coat and gently wrapped it around her. She flinched at first, but didn't pull away. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you warm." He took her inside the hotel lobby, ignoring the curious glances from guests and staff. The front desk manager, a young man named Tyler, looked surprised. "Mr. Bennett, is everything all right?" Charles didn't even break stride. "I need a blanket and hot cocoa, right now." Tyler blinked. "Yes, sir, of course." They found a quiet corner in the lounge where the fire crackled softly. Lily sat in a large armchair, legs tucked under her, sipping from a steaming mug. She was quiet. Her eyes darted around the room like she wasn't used to being inside places like this. Charles sat across from her, unsure of what to do next. He'd closed multi-million-dollar deals, advised presidents, and built empires. But right now, he didn't know what to say to a lost little girl. After a long silence, Lily looked up at him. "Are you going to call the police?" Charles hesitated. Do you want me to? She shook her head, eyes filling with fear. They'll take me away. I don't want to go back. Back where? Lily clutched the coat tighter around her. The house, the one with the other kids. They hurt us there. Charles leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. What house, Lily? I don't know the name, she said. They made us work, and if we didn't, they hit us. He felt his stomach turn. This wasn't just a homeless child. This was something far worse, something dark, something dangerous. Charles knew he had two choices. He could do what was expected, call the authorities, let the system handle it. Or he could do something else, something that went against logic but felt deeply right. He looked at her, really looked, and said, Lily, do you trust me? She didn't answer, but her eyes softened just enough. That was all he needed. Charles picked up his phone, but instead of dialing the police, he made a different call to a woman named Diane, someone from his past, someone he hadn't spoken to in over a decade, but someone he knew he could trust. Diane, it's Charles. I need your help. It's about a little girl. What Charles didn't know then was that this moment, this single act of compassion, was going to change both their lives forever. He thought he was helping her, but in time he'd come to realize Lily was helping him too, and that was just the beginning. The line went quiet for a moment after Charles spoke. Diane hadn't heard from him in nearly 12 years, not since they parted ways after a business fallout that became personal, but the tone in his voice, it wasn't business this time. It was something else, urgent, heavy. I'm listening, she finally said, her voice calm and steady, like it had always been. There's a little girl, Charles said quietly, glancing across the hotel lounge where Lily now dozed off in the armchair, his coat still wrapped around her like armor. She was asleep in the back seat of my car, alone, dirty, freezing. She says she escaped from a home where they hurt kids. Diane didn't ask why he was calling her of all people. She just said, Where are you? Maplewood Grand, downtown Albany. I'll be there in 30 minutes. When he ended the call, Charles just sat there, watching Lily sleep. There were still crumbs on her face from the cookie she'd devoured earlier. She looked so small in that chair, like she could disappear into it. And something inside him tightened, a feeling he hadn't felt since his own daughter, Emily, passed away 22 years ago. He had buried that pain deep, so deep he never talked about it, never let himself feel it, not really. But now this little girl had somehow opened that locked door inside him, and it scared him. Diane arrived just before noon, wearing jeans and a worn leather jacket, her auburn hair tied back. She looked older, wiser, but still had that sharp gaze. When she walked into the lounge, Charles stood to meet her, unsure of how she'd react after all these years. But Diane surprised him. She gave him a nod, not warm, not cold, just real. Where is she? He pointed to the chair. Diane approached slowly, crouched near Lily, and gently touched her arm. Lily stirred, opening her eyes in alarm. It's okay, Diane said softly. You're safe. Lily blinked at her, confused, then looked over at Charles. She's a friend, Charles said. She's here to help. Diane offered a soft smile. Hey Lily, I'm Diane. I work with kids who've been through stuff. You don't have to say anything right now. Just know that I'm here for you. Lily studied her for a long moment, then nodded ever so slightly. Charles and Diane stepped away to talk in private. You believe her? He asked. Diane didn't hesitate. Every word. So what do we do? We keep her safe, for now, and we don't involve the police until we know exactly what she ran from. If it's a trafficking ring or an illegal home, We can't risk tipping anyone off yet. We need time. I know people who can help investigate quietly." Charles let out a breath. "I don't know why I called you." "Yes, you do," she replied. "You trust me." They agreed to leave the hotel through the side entrance. Charles had a private estate 2 hours south, quiet and secluded. It would give them some time to figure things out without drawing attention. Diane followed in her own car, while Lily rode in the front with Charles this time. Still quiet, but no longer trembling. The estate sat on a hill, surrounded by trees that were just beginning to shed their autumn leaves. It wasn't just a home, it was a fortress of solitude that Charles had retreated to for years, but it had never felt as alive as it did that afternoon. They gave Lily a warm bath, a soft robe, and a room that overlooked the lake. She was shy, barely speaking, but when she saw the plush bear on the guest bed, her face lit up for the first time. She didn't say anything, but she clutched it tight, like she'd just been handed the whole world. That night, Charles sat by the fireplace, while Diane reviewed everything Lily had told them so far. It wasn't much, no addresses, no clear names, just the house, and a man she called Mr. Vince, who wore gloves and carried a cane. She mentioned other kids, some sick, some hurt, and a woman who kept records in a red binder. It wasn't enough to make an arrest, but it was enough to start digging. Diane made a few calls, quiet ones. She still had contacts, people who ran shelters, social workers who saw too much but couldn't always act. It would take time, but she was confident they'd find the place. Meanwhile, Charles found himself watching Lily from the hallway that night, just standing there, listening to her soft breathing as she clutched the bear. She looked peaceful, but he couldn't stop the ache in his chest. Later, in the kitchen, he said quietly to Diane, "Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" "You're doing something," she replied. "That's more than most." He nodded. "I lost my daughter 22 years ago. She was 9, cancer. I never thought I'd feel this again." Diane's eyes softened. "Maybe this is life giving you a second chance, not to replace what you lost, but to remember how much you still have to give." The days that followed were quiet but heavy with emotion. Lily started to speak more, little things, her favorite cereal, a song she liked. She even laughed once when Charles burned his toast and tried to blame the toaster. But she still woke up screaming some nights, drenched in sweat, crying for someone to help. And every time Charles was there, sitting by her bed, holding her hand. One morning, Lily finally asked, "Are you gonna send me back?" Charles looked her in the eyes and said, "No, I promise you, you're safe here." But safety is fragile, and peace, especially the kind born from chaos, rarely lasts long. Because the next morning, while Charles and Diane sat in the study, reviewing some photos sent by one of her contacts, a black SUV pulled up to the edge of the property. It was unmarked. The man who stepped out wore gloves and carried a cane. Charles saw him from the upstairs window, and his blood ran cold. Charles froze at the window, the breath caught in his throat. The man outside didn't knock. He didn't announce himself. He just stood there, tall, composed, one gloved hand resting on the handle of a polished black cane. He was looking up at the house like he already owned it. Charles stepped back, heart racing. "Diane," he called, trying to keep his voice even. She looked up from the table. "What is it?" "We've got company." They both moved quickly. Diane followed him to the window and instantly stiffened when she saw the man. "That's got to be him, Mr. Vince." "How would he know she's here?" Charles asked, almost whispering. Diane's mind raced. Only a few people knew. Someone must have talked or been watched. Lily was in the den, watching an old cartoon with the bear in her lap, oblivious, safe, for now. "We don't let him near her," Diane said, already grabbing her phone and walking toward the front. "And we don't open that door." But Charles didn't wait. He walked outside. The gravel crunched under his shoes as he approached the man. "You're trespassing," Charles said firmly. Mr. Vince smiled with cold politeness. "I believe you found something that doesn't belong to you." Charles clenched his jaw. "She's not an object." "Oh, I didn't mean it like that," Vince said smoothly. "We're very concerned for her safety. She's troubled, confused. It's easy for someone like her to make up stories, to say things that aren't true." Charles narrowed his eyes. "You know what she said?" Vince took a slow step forward. "I know she's been through things. We've been trying to help her for a long time. Our facility provides a place for girls like her. It's delicate work, but sometimes they run, and when they do, they can become a danger to themselves or to others." Diane stepped outside then, phone still in hand. "We've reported this to a few friends," she said. "The girl's in safe hands now. If you try to take her, you'll be on the front page of every paper from here to New York." Vince smiled again, like he'd heard this all before. "I think you'll find that no paper prints what it's told not to. We're not the people you want to make enemies of." But Charles didn't back down. "Then I guess you've got yourself a problem." Vince tilted his head. "You don't know what you're getting into, Mr. Langston. This isn't your world. It never was." "Maybe not," Charles said, stepping closer, voice low and calm. "But I have more money than you'll ever know, and enough friends to make your life very uncomfortable. So if you come near her again, if you so much as breathe in her direction, I'll bury you." There was a long pause. Vince didn't flinch, but he didn't stay either. He just gave a slight nod, turned, and walked calmly back to his SUV. Diane watched the car vanish down the hill. "He'll be back." "I know," Charles replied. That night, they moved Lily to a safer room, one without windows facing the road. Charles had the security team for double the perimeter watch. Diane made more calls, this time to people who owed her favors she'd never planned on using. Meanwhile, Lily was growing more trusting. She talked more during meals, asked questions, even offered to help set the table. One morning, while Charles walked with her through the backyard garden, she suddenly asked, "Do you have kids?" He stopped, looked down at her. "I did." "What happened to her?" "She got sick," he said, "and I couldn't save her." Lily looked up at him with those deep, quiet eyes. "You're trying to save me." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. That evening, one of Diane's contacts finally called back. They'd traced Mr. Vince to a shell organization operating under the guise of a youth rehabilitation center. No licenses, no records, but a pattern of children reported missing after placement. Whispers of abuse. The place was run through layers of fake charities and dummy corporations. Impossible to touch directly. But there was a weak point. A woman named Carla Becker, middle management, bookkeeper, had been seen with a red binder. She was the kind of person who knew everything, but didn't realize her value. Yet, Diane knew what had to be done. "We find her, we get the binder, and we blow this whole thing wide open." Charles didn't hesitate. "I'll fund everything." They tracked Carla down to a small house in Poughkeepsie, alone, nervous, scared. At first, she denied everything, said she didn't know anyone named Vince, but Diane's gentle persistence and Charles's silent presence wore her down. When she finally broke, she handed over the binder. Inside were names, photos, dates, notes, dozens of children. Some had been relocated, others marked no longer active. A few had stars beside their names. Lily was one of them. Diane stared at the page. They were planning something. "They still are," Charles added. But now they had evidence. They turned it over to the right people, investigative journalists, an honest federal agent Diane trusted from her past. It would take time, care, but the machine had started moving. Back at the estate, Lily was in the kitchen, trying to bake cookies with the housekeeper. She had flour on her nose. She was smiling. But when Diane stepped into the room with a strange look on her face, Lily turned. "What's wrong?" Charles walked in behind her, holding the binder, and Lily's face changed. She recognized it instantly. "That's it," she whispered. "That's the one she always carried, the red one." "You're not going back," Charles said. "Not ever. But we need your help, Lily. We need to stop them, for the other kids." Lily looked scared, but she nodded. "I remember everything." And that's when the doorbell rang. No one had approached the house by car. Everyone froze. Charles glanced at the monitors, static. Diane reached for her phone, no signal. And Lily slowly backed toward the wall, because she recognized the sound of the voice outside, calling her name. The doorbell rang again, a sharp, insistent sound that cut through the thick silence of the house. The monitors flickered back to life, only to show a blank screen. The sense of unease that had settled in the room thickened, the air suddenly colder. Charles motioned for Diane to stay back as he walked toward the front door, his every step measured and deliberate. The last thing they needed now was panic, but Lily's face had drained of color. She was shaking, clutching her arms tightly as if the room itself were closing in on her. "He's here," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's him. I knew he wouldn't stop. He never stops." Diane hurried to Lily's side, her hands gently resting on the girl's shoulders. "Lily, you're safe here. We won't let him take you. Do you understand? You're safe." But Lily wasn't listening. She was staring at the door, her eyes wide, fixed in fear. "He's not here for me anymore," she said quietly. "He's here for you. For both of you." The doorbell rang again, this time with urgency. Charles reached for the handle, but Diane caught his arm. "We can't open it," she said, her voice firm. "It's a trap. He'll try to get inside. We have to be smart." Charles took a deep breath, calming himself. "I know, but I've got to face this. We've come this far. We can't back down now." He turned to Diane, giving her a look that said everything without words. She nodded in understanding, even though every instinct screamed at her to keep running. She could feel the danger now, the weight of it pressing down on them. Charles opened the door just enough to peer outside. What he saw made his blood run cold. Standing there, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, was Mr. Vince. But this time, there was something different about him. He wasn't alone. Flanking him were two other men, both dressed in dark suits, their eyes hidden behind dark glasses. "Mr. Langston," Vince greeted with a smile that sent a chill through Charles's spine. "I see you've made yourself quite comfortable here. It's a beautiful home, isn't it?" Charles didn't respond, his gaze steady. "What do you want?" Vince's smile never wavered. "I'm not here to discuss business. I just wanted to let you know that this is bigger than you. This is bigger than your little life, your precious little girl." He glanced over Charles's shoulder, his eyes briefly meeting Lily's before flicking back to him. "I think you know what I mean." Charles's pulse quickened, but he kept his composure. "You'll never get her. You'll never touch her again." Vince tilted his head, almost as if amused. "You misunderstand, Mr. Langston. She's already mine. She's always been mine. You're just borrowing her for now." Charles gritted his teeth, his mind racing. He glanced back at Diane, who was standing just behind him, holding Lily tightly in her arms. "We've already exposed you," Charles said, his voice calm but sharp. "Your people are coming for you. You won't get away with this." Vince laughed, a low, mocking sound. "You think you're the first to try and stop me? The first to think they can fight back? You're nothing but pawns in a much larger game, Mr. Langston, and soon you'll find out just how far I can go." Charles stepped forward, blocking the door. He wasn't going to let Vince or anyone else in, not today. "You have one chance to walk away," Charles said, his voice steely. "Leave now and never come back. If you don't, I'll make sure you regret it." Vince's smile faded, and for a moment, Charles saw something darker in his eyes. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and almost suffocating. But just as he thought Vince would escalate things further, the sound of sirens cut through the stillness, growing louder by the second. Vince's gaze shifted quickly, his body tensing. "You think this will stop me? You think the law will save you?" He spat, his words laced with venom. But then, as if on cue, the police arrived. The house was swarmed with officers, federal agents, local police, and even a few of Diane's trusted contacts. The men with Vince immediately reached for their weapons, but they were too slow. The agents were already on them, pulling them to the ground, handcuffing them before they had a chance to react. Vince, still calm, turned to Charles. "This isn't over," he said, his voice a low growl. "You can't win. You're just a part of the system, and it always gets its way." Charles didn't flinch. "We'll see about that." As Vince and his men were led away, Charles stepped back into the house. Diane had her arms around Lily, who was trembling but no longer looking afraid. She was looking at Charles now, her eyes filled with something new. Hope. Charles crouched down to her level. "It's over," he said softly, his voice filled with relief. "You're free now. They can't hurt you anymore." Lily nodded, her tears falling freely now. "I never thought I'd be free," she whispered. "I never thought I'd get away." "You did," Diane said gently, brushing the hair from Lily's face. "And we'll help you start over. You'll be safe here. We'll make sure of that." The weight of the past few days slowly began to lift as the officers finished securing the perimeter, taking everything they had gathered into evidence. The nightmare that had haunted Lily for so long was finally over. She was no longer a victim. She was free to live her life. Charles and Diane stood together, watching as Lily was slowly enveloped by the warmth of her new life. The darkness had passed. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They had won. They had saved her. As the last of the officers left, Diane wrapped her arm around Charles's shoulders. They stood there in silence, watching Lily start to smile again, her laughter light and genuine. This was only the beginning of her new life, and they were going to make sure it was everything she deserved. This story is a reminder that no matter how dark the past may seem, there is always a way out. It's never too late to start over, to fight for what's right, and to stand up for those who need it the most. At Stories of Hope, we believe in the power of change. If you've been inspired by this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible real-life transformations. The fight for hope is never over. Thank you for being part of this journey.